very much again, Sam. Lots of food for thought there for this panel. So let's introduce the rest of our panel this afternoon. So we're joined also by Hattie Fawcett, so founder and CEO of Focus for Business. So I understand you've worked in 3 startups, raised equity investment for your previous business, also managed some of the investments, Kelly Hoppen, who'll be known to many of you, that she made on Dragon's Den. And now you help other businesses raise capital, so you're kind of on the other side of the fence, as it were. So welcome, Hattie. Richard Bermond, no stranger to this stage, but rocking a new job title, I see. Co-Chief Banking Officer at the British Business Bank, where you've been in a variety of senior roles, I believe, since 2019. The British Business Bank is, of course, the UK government's economic development bank. Core programmes, if my stats are up to date, Richard, I'm sure you'll tell me if they're not, supporting over £17.4 billion of finance to almost 64,000 smaller businesses. So a really important player. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. Louise Doyle, CEO and co-founder of Needi.co.uk, which is all about corporate gifting. That's right, isn't it? You've raised more than £1 million to date, so hoping we can get lots of tips and tricks from you. You're also very welcome indeed. And joining us by the power of technology, Andrea, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good to be here.
Thank you. So Andrea Reynolds is the founder and CEO of Swoop, a business funding and savings platform which helps businesses to discover loans, equity and grants, which is a really important area, and I think something that people don't talk often enough about, because obviously the benefit is you don't have to give it back and you don't have to give up any equity either, and to identify and easily make savings. And Andrea has also successfully raised capital for Swoop. That's right, isn't it, Andrea?
That's right. I'm not with you because we've just closed our latest VC round here in the US. So I'm sorry not to be with you, but it's for good reasons.
Sending you congratulations from London. A round of applause, everyone, for Andrea. Can you tell us, hot off the press, I won't put it in the newspaper, but how much have you raised?
We just closed £6 million, and the main reason for the round was to take on a strategic investor from here in the US to help us with our market expansion here. So
Excellent.
Yeah, it's very.
Congratulations, exciting times. Look at that, everybody. We got that perfectly timed, didn't we? So I'd like to start by getting some kind of thoughts from the women on the panel who've raised capital. Tell us a bit about what that experience was like. And of course, the title of this session is The Untold Story of Gendered Funding. So tell us a secret that you haven't told anyone else before. Hattie, I'm going to come to you first. So when it came to raising funding, how did you find the experience? Tell us all your secrets. We won't tell anyone.
Love it. So I raised 15 years ago now, and I think the thing that makes me most sad is very little has changed. I was a female founder, obviously, raising for early stage startup. We had revenue, but it was fledgling revenue, so we were quite early stage. I would find myself pitching my business, which was probably more targeting female women were our customers predominantly, and I would find myself pitching in a room to men who didn't really understand the business I was pitching. I would be asked questions about how I was going to eliminate risk when my fellow male pitchers would be asked how they were going to expand the opportunity. But it was all about how was I going to make sure nothing went wrong, and I didn't understand why there were these differences. And do you really want a horrible story?
Yeah, we're gonna end on a high, but please give us the war story.
So I turned up at one pitch event, having given birth to my daughter 3 weeks beforehand, not feeling my best as a woman, but there I was, raring to pitch my business because it was important to me. And I was introduced, this is Hattie, she's just given birth, isn't it wonderful she's here? And I thought I was here to pitch my business. And that was the reality, and it's not as bad as that, I hope, these days. But I think as women, we have to work hard to be seen as business owners rather than, I don't know, one of the many other roles we play in life.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. How about you, Louise? What's been your experience?
So for me, I was actually, when I was doing my fundraise most recently, I was actually pregnant with twins at the time. Thank goodness for Zoom, because most of my meetings were sort of from here upwards. But I was actually so lucky in the end that I've got two VCs that have invested in Needi. Both of them are women that I spoke to initially. So when I was able to speak to them about Needi and what we do, we're, a corporate gifting concierge service. We're here to support local businesses and match them with corporates. They really understood and got it. Actually, British Business Bank, as you know as well, are also one of our investors through that. So I suppose to summarise it, I would say it was hardcore. Like, you have to be so resilient, like Hattie was saying, to get there and to get over all of the obstacles. But I do believe that with the ability to really, if you can find somebody that understands what you're trying to achieve and the power of that, and find somebody that you can relate to, then that's how you get the investment. We found some investors that really listened, really understood and really related. And as a result, we're sitting here today.
Excellent. I think there's lots of good kind of practical insights there that will be really helpful for the audience. Andrea, I'm going to bring you in just a second because you're going to have to give us a sneak behind the curtain to how you did that. But have things changed since you started your business? Does it chime what we're hearing here from your superscaler women, those 150 women you're working with?
So it's interesting. When I talk to the women, and given when I was in investment banking days, over 24 years, I probably acted for less than 5 women raising money. So that just goes to show most of my clients were men who were raising. But now I have just a community of female founders. It's a pretty consistent theme. I would say 95% plus have bootstrapped. And you see what they've done with so little that I don't actually think the right sort of funding for them is VC money. They've actually quite liked growing a bit slower, but they've bootstrapped, they've got angels, they've got friends and family, they've reinvested money, they've grown in their own way and their own time, but they've done it slower.
Mm-hmm. And that actually correlates very much with somebody I interviewed this weekend, and she said that she got so disheartened the first time she was trying to raise money that she decided not to bother going to the VCs this time around, and she raised angel money from friends and family instead. But she does acknowledge that means she's probably going to have to grow a bit slower, and that's a real pity. Although I take on board your point that it's not necessarily the right route for everyone, is it? Andrea, I'm interested in hearing your experience now. So how have you achieved this new huge fundraise?
Well, I would say, first of all, Swoop is like a case study of our platform. We've raised every form of finance, from the startup loan right through to grants that we won, right through to SEIS, EIS investments. So it's always been part of our journey. And for me, I've never been daunted by raising money. I've never been daunted by walking into a room, and whether the room is all men, some women. I think walking into the room and just seeing it as a genderless room sets the mindset for you. So regardless of what anyone's saying to you, if you go in with the right mindset, you are already winning them over. So I've just always taken that approach. I would say one funny story I have in my raise, on the first time we were doing a raise out in the US, I was going into these VCs, all these tech pro guys talking to me and saying, oh, are you sure you're ambitious enough? You could be growing so much faster. Why don't you get a bigger round in and spend more on your marketing, because, your CAC to LTV is really good. And I was explaining I was trying to build a sustainable business. I always say I'm building a forever business. And I wanted to prove we could be profitable as a fintech while expanding into new markets. And they said, oh, are you sure you're ambitious enough? Silicon Valley Bank crashes. I go back to these exact same VCs 12 months later, and they're like, we think you're great. You're so capital efficient. This is exactly the model we're looking for. So I think we're becoming trendy. How female founders operate their businesses is now appreciated since the cost of capital has gone up. So I personally see green shoots in the market. So I'm full of positivity, which I can share with you as we go through this discussion. But for us, is similar to Louise. We just found the fund that really got what we were doing. We chose them as much as they chose us. And so we've agreed kind of what the next 2 years looks like before we think about our next round to go to the next level.
Mm-hmm. And Richard, at the British Business Bank, how much do you think about this? I know we've met maybe 5 years ago, and I'm sure the dial has moved, or has it? So how are things looking from your perspective?
I mean, the dial has moved nationally, but not very much. So if you go back to the Rose Review, when back in 2019, they looked at sort of, and it's probably the most extreme end of the spectrum, but sort of, but it's the most extreme statistic of sort of fully female sort of led businesses, and only 2% would receive investment. And that's moved, but it's now 2.8%. So it's moved, but it's not moved very much at all. And it is something we think about a huge amount. And we have examples of success. So the startup loan program we run, sort of 40% of the startup loan recipients are female founders. And that's sort of 11,000 every year. So it says to me that you can write this imbalance, and you can make progress. And there's lots of activities that we're doing, but as I think what's come across, it is nationally the progress is still slow.
And I'm glad you mentioned the 2% figure there, because that's something I often think about, and it's definitely a number that I've included in stories that I've written for the paper. But is it a useful one? Because when you drill down into what that 2% actually is, I think from memory it's all female-founded teams, of which there are a very small proportion to begin with. As we said, there are other forms of capital that sometimes suit businesses better. So Sam, do you think that 2% number, do you think we use it too much? Do you think that actually sometimes it can reinforce as well negative stereotypes? I know there's women who I know who will think, oh, I don't know if I've got the energy to go out and raise money in that kind of marketplace if I'm going to face some of those experiences that our panellists have already mentioned.
So I think the 2% figure, which has been around for a long time, is for only female-founded teams. So the whole team have to be female-founded. If we think we're in an age where it's great if there's a female founder and a male founder, those companies are getting funded exponentially. So you're probably looking at nearly 20% of companies that have a female founder that get funding. So it is growing. The 2% isn't as bad as it seems. It's not moving much, but how many more female-only companies are being set up? So I only look at female-founded companies as a whole, like there could be men in there as well. So those numbers are rising very, very fast. So if you look at some JP Morgan stats that follow 200 female-powered businesses, that was less than £1 billion raised 5 years ago. Now £4 billion has gone to female-powered businesses. Now that might be a female founder, it might be a female co-founder, it might be a female heavy management team. But those are the sorts of stats that I prefer to look at to see what's actually going on. And if you look at the number of companies coming through that are fundable, those are rising. So women do want to build businesses slower. I'm now absolutely convinced we do it in a different way. We build in a different way, and not all forms of capital are suited to that. So if we've been tracking at the Scale Up Institute the number of female-founded scale-ups that have got to 10 million revenue. Now in 2019, there were less than 200 companies that were female-founded that had got to 10 million revenue. Now there are 750 nearly. So women are building great companies. They're bootstrapping, but we are growing great companies, and those great companies will be funded. So as long as we're growing the numbers and the numbers aren't shrinking, I'm less worried about the funding, because the funding will move to fit the companies that are very backable.
Great insight. Thank you, Sam. And we have a room here full of lots of non-women. Frankly, why should they care? Why should anybody care about this stuff? I'm going to come to you, Louise. Why should everybody in this room care about the fact that women aren't getting funded enough? Even if the numbers are 20% versus 2%, it's still not enough, is it?
Absolutely. I think it's about the types of businesses that women are creating. I think there's quite a few stats out there to show that in general, when we are creating businesses, it's usually to do something life-changing for the world, to help support others. And I think that to be able to support and to nurture that kind of ambition to help others to grow, I think is so, so important. I look at my own daughter now, I've got a 7-year-old Ella who has grown up just thinking that, that mums are bosses, and that they grow companies, and that's really helping her ambition too. And I think that, leveling that playing field, we know what it's like with pendulums, right? They swing one way, they have to swing back another. And I think just supporting each other to do that means that we're going to have a really diverse amount of businesses that bring something different to the world.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And Andrea, I just want to bring you back in here. Obviously, you're out in the States at the moment. When we're thinking about kind of comparisons between the UK and the US, we often hear very negative comparisons here in the UK that, you know, we don't take enough risks. We have the wrong appetite for failure, and we don't view failure as a kind of learning exercises the same way as they do in the US. How about funding? What are the experiences that you have had with VCs in America versus the UK?
I think the American understanding of what venture actually means is very different to Europe. Europe is more risk averse. So sometimes when you're going through a venture capital round in Europe, it may as well be a private equity round for the level of de-risking that a venture fund is looking for. Whereas in the US, they buy into the value proposition, they buy into the entrepreneur, and the speed with which they transact is about 6 times faster than the UK and Europe. And they're okay with failure. So obviously the US is a lot more comfortable with regards to failure, and I think their bankruptcy rules generates that sort of, okay, well, it's almost a mark of you'll be a better entrepreneur the second time around. But you know, just getting back to the point of the moving of the dial, genuinely, anecdotally, I see more female founders in fintech than I do male. What we're seeing is there was a 27% increase in female exits out of the US last year. So that's creating more capital going back into female founded businesses. There was a 24% increase in the value of funding actually raised by females in the US last year as well. So I think some of it came down to pipeline. The reason it was taking so long is we needed pipeline. We needed pipeline of more female founders setting up businesses, looking to scale and take on that level of funding. We needed pipeline of more female representation at VCs, but you're starting to see all of that come to fruition now. So I would be erring on more where Sam is going, looking at the positive metrics that we're starting to see. But I would say that the US, yes, you're up against tough competition, which we should all love, which I do. But once you get a VC that you know you like and they like your business, the time to transact is so much faster.
Love that. Very optimistic tone, Andrea. And what do we think about the role of mentoring? So we've got a few questions here that have come through from the audience, and we're going to come out to you as well with a roving mic if anyone's got a question for one of our panellists. There's been a few questions directly about you, Sam, if you'll be people's mentor in the audience. So watch out for those LinkedIn messages winging your way any second. But yeah, particularly, I guess, for female entrepreneurs, what is the role of mentoring? And is that kind of the gap that you're trying to bridge a little bit with superscalers? And I want to get your view on this as well, Hattie.
Yeah, so I'll talk about superscalers first. So we set that up because we felt underrepresented founders needed a voice at the table. When decisions are being made, if we want to change the system, we need to be at the table. So we thought, right, okay, what's the best way to do it? We will help underrepresented founders build a business of serious scale. Because I felt like when I got to 50 million, that's when I got a serious voice. People take you seriously. They don't say, you know, everything you're doing is rubbish, which they tended to do for the many years before. So that's really important. So what we think is necessary to help female founders, particularly to scale to that 50 million, and it's not just about funding, and it's not actually the biggest reason isn't funding, it's all about building the community, having like-minded people who've done it to give them confidence that they can do it. Because many women are just out there doing it on their own. They don't have a community, they don't have a peer-to-peer group. Like Andrea's saying, you know, there are very few women who've ever built a business past 50 million revenue in the UK. It's only 80. We took a year to find the data. The data was impossible to find. 80 women ever have done it. So we now know who those 80 are. We can get them to help the next women coming through, learn all the lessons that we didn't learn. We were making up as we went along in disrupting all these different sectors. Now there are role models. We can learn the lessons and we can help collapse that time it takes to superscale by just having a platform to go, how did you do that? I'm a SaaS business. I want a customer success piece. How do you do it? We've got these WhatsApp groups where women are asking questions and they're answered within 3 minutes. Well, that would have taken me years to go through. So that's what we're doing, sort of mentoring on a massive scale. But for me, in my 24-year journey at FinCap, I have loved mentors, but not the same one. So what I've done is try to grab someone's time. Like, so will I be a mentor? It's not like a long-term thing. You say, can I just have 10 minutes of your time? Quickly give them a problem. Will they be able to help? So I think multiple mentors that you need at your particular point in your revenue journey that can help you with that one specific issue. That's what mentors are great for. And people are generally really generous with their time if you keep it short and don't ask for a long-term commitment.
That's really good advice. So specific inquiries. Hattie, I'd like to get your thought on that. And I think we've got a roving mic. Do we have any questions in the audience? We do. So a couple of quick thoughts on that, and then we'll take the first of our questions. If you can keep your hands up. The lady in the front row here, please, Ava.
I couldn't agree more with what Sam said about the importance of mentors. The right advice at the right time can be as powerful as the cash, particularly in the very early stages. I work at pre-seed and seed stage, and getting the right advice when you haven't built a business before is really powerful. I also agree about the variety of mentors on getting a range of voices. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is if you get the right mentors who might also be early stage angel investors, then you start at that point bringing early stage businesses together with early stage investors. And the journey that then unfolds is really exciting.
Quick question. Can Richard be a mentor because he's a man? Is he allowed into the circle of trust?
Look, let's be real here. We live in a world where, we are both men and women, right? So why would you exclude men?
Okay.
They have stuff to give too.
I was just being cheeky, but no. Lady in the front row.
Hi. My name's Rashmi Dubey, and there was a report released last year on the task force around female funding. And one of the things, and I want to know partly for the room, is how do we, when you say female funding and that attraction, there is then a breakdown of bias within that female funding that is geared more to, it's aimed at more white people than it is for Black and Asians. So how do those that are female founders overcome that bias? How do we bring ourselves to that attention? And also there's the regional bias as well if you're outside of London.
Okay, good question. And would you like to take this one, Louise?
I'd really like to, actually, yes. So for me, I think I mentioned before that actually it was through the British Business Bank that I actually got some of my funding, which was they were giving that to one of the regional VCs in Northern Ireland, where I live. And for myself, it was actually being introduced to the right people, to the right funds. And I think actually there's a real education piece. So I believe if I hadn't have met, for me, my ally or mentor or whatever you want to call him, his name's John Ferrist. He's the Ulster Bank Accelerator Manager. And he did all of those introductions that I needed to where I needed to go to get the money. And I think if we can really spread that information wider and get that, those regional funds working better, then that will help a lot more people.
Do you just want to add a point to that quickly, Richard?
Yeah, it is a big part of the role of the bank is to try and ensure SMEs get access to finance, but also to try and create the ecosystems and to convene, because not just investment funding, but debt funding as well tends to follow the path of least resistance. And so part of our role is to always put those circuit breakers in to kind of make sure that investment or funds, either our own funds or the funds the bank has, or that we're kind of crowding in private funds, gets into parts of the countries and but also sort of different parts of the country where ultimately people are furthest in finance and they don't have that connection and that ability to sort of know exactly where to get it and how.
And the Scale Up Institute's doing some great work around that, isn't it? Kind of connecting those clusters. Thank you very much for your question. We've got time for one super quick final question. Ava, just this gentleman here. Thank you.
Hiya there. I'm called Peter, and I'm the CEO of a company which is going for money. At the minute, we're a startup doing bamboo toilet paper because everyone needs toilet paper. Jess is a co-founder of mine. She's Australian. She's incredible. She's absolutely amazing, and I love Jess to bits. But one of the struggles that we're having is getting over that line, to raise that money. So we've got everything, we've got the team, we've got the scalability, we've got everything in place, including SAIS of 3 days ago. What would be your top tip to kind of get over that line, to get that first bit of investment in so we can, start to purchase the stock, etc.?
That's a great question. As it's going to be the final one, I'll ask all of you for one quick point on how to raise capital. And let's take it beyond just women raising funding, so it's helpful for everybody. So let's start with Andrea.
That one's easy. I would start with the startup loan. It's how I started Swoop. And both of you, as co-founders, can apply for the startup loan. And I would say the key to this is it's not a pretty picture building your capital at the beginning. So you need to do startup loan, get your traction, bit of proof points, get some revenue in, then go for your SEIS. And SEIS is the best way to get your early stage capital, and then keep going on your EIS. Look for regional grants. There are still some available. All of this is on Swoop as well. That's why we exist. Our motto is that basically you access finance no matter where you are or who you are. It's all through your data. But I would start with the startup loan.
Super. Thank you very much. We are out of time, so I do want to get a quick thought from each of you. Louise?
Really quickly, I would say grants. Really don't underestimate the grants that are out there. It's a really great start. And speak to everybody. Don't be precious about your idea. Speak to everyone.
That's a great bit of advice.
Lots of options out there. I mean, it's already been said very clearly, but don't just think about one, just think about the right finance at the right time for the right need.
Brilliant. Hattie?
I'd say don't do it alone. Get yourself a community of people around you going on a similar journey. Mentors, other founders, advisors who can support with documents, whatever. Don't do it alone. It's hard. Be part of a community.
And it sounds like you're already halfway there with the co-founder. And final word to you, Sam.
And I would say this is like living in the land of no. I always just say the earlier you are raising money, the earlier in your journey, you are living in the land of no. You will get so many no's until you find a yes. So do not give up. It will take hundreds, whether you're a man or a woman, it still takes hundreds of people to go through. So I would say start with LinkedIn, start with cold leads, start with anyone you know, your ex-boss, just scatter anyone that might lead you to the next person. So just get used to, it's just going to be quite challenging and you will get many no's, but don't let that sort of stop you from carrying on if you believe the idea is good.
Wow, what a great note to end on. Everybody, thank our panel. We've got Andrea, we've got Louise, Richard, Hattie, Sam. Thank you all so much. Thank you. As our panellists leave the stage, I'm going to hand back over to my co-host, Ollie Barrett, who I'm sure, thank you very much, I'm sure has been listening intently in the wings, not just putting his feet up like he said he was going to be doing. We do have more brilliant speakers coming up for you this afternoon. Our next keynote session is in the main studio here at 3:30 with Joe Foster, co-founder of Reebok. And that will be followed by a session on navigating a shifting trade landscape. So do make sure you join us for both of those. Ollie, are you receiving me?
Loud and clear, and you've set the scene again perfectly for lots more questions, but I thought there were so many helpful tips there, but also pointing to the sorts of organisations that can help us to grow our businesses. So thank you, Hannah, and I will continue the conversation backstage.
Super, thank you, Ollie.
Thanks, everybody. Hattie, are you all right for coming and joining? Now we're streaming live at Elite Business Live. Very good to be joined by Hattie Fawcett. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good to be here.
Fantastic on-stage discussion. I wanted to go back to the start of your journey, actually, because when you were really starting out, how did you fund your business? Where did it actually come from?
So I bootstrapped.
Yeah.
I put my own funds into it, my life savings.
Yeah.
And use that to build the traction that Andrea was talking about in her answer. So to get the product made, get our first customers, and that then allowed us to go for external funding.
And just if someone's just tuning in, catching up, what type of business was that, the very first
So
one?
I was running a marketplace. We helped designer makers sell their work to consumers.
And what if somebody's sort of at that crossroads, they're saying, well, surely the best source of finance is from our customers, and yet I keep hearing about this investment opportunity. How would you encourage them to structure their thinking as to whether getting outside investment is even a useful thing for them?
So outside investment isn't for everybody at every stage. And I think it's really important to be clear about where you are with your business before you go and speak. So, for example, a VC is never going to back a pre-revenue business. So if you haven't yet got your product and service and your first customers, don't go talking to VCs. Angel investors, on the other hand, might be interested in backing your business. So it's about stage and where you're at, but it's also about what your aspirations are and how fast you want to grow and where you want to take your business. Not everybody wants external shareholders.
Right, and presumably in the world of venture capital, what they are looking for is very big hits, someone that will return their whole fund. In other words, a huge return.
Exponential growth.
And that might not be the sort of scale of business that you want to build.
Exactly, or that you're ready to build at this point. It doesn't mean you might not be ready to build it later, but it's about, as a founder, you've got personal choice too, and I don't think it always feels like that to founders.
And let's get quite practical on this thought around, you've mentioned angels already, but also on mentors, because initially it does come down to networks, doesn't it? What if we say, look, I know I need these things, but I don't know where to start. I just don't have them in my network.
Yep.
Where do they go?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I started the funding accelerator program I run, because we have over 65 mentors who support the founders going through our programs. And the program helps them prepare their documents for investment, helps them find the right investors and attract those investors, and helps them close the deal. And we do that through education, but also through opening our network to mentors and advisors and investors.
And this is part of your work at Focused for Business?
This is what we do at Focused for Business, that's right.
And so what about just... That is a very specific, excellent example. What if we go right up to the macro? What if Rachel Reeves calls you in and says, look, how do we unlock even more funding into even more brilliant businesses, especially ones led by women? What are some other levers? What would you want to be seen happen across the UK?
There's loads of things you can do. I think the most fundamental thing is that we start expanding the number of women angel investors we have. Women angels are 25 to 50% times more likely to back a female founder, but we only have 14% of angels are women.
Right, I'm putting you on the spot. How do we grow that pool? How do we do that in practice?
Well, that is exactly what we're working on right now. We have grant funding from the British Business Bank to help us build a pathway for women who are interested in angel investment but don't necessarily know what it is, don't know where to start exploring it really experientially, not theoretically, but experientially through mentoring.
And for someone tuned into that, Hattie, how could they find out a little bit more?
So best way would be through Focus for Business. And we will be making some announcements in the next few weeks about exactly how that process works.
Watch this space. That's Focus for Business on growing the pool of angels, but also helping more brilliant founders.
Growing the pool of angels in order that female founders get more investment.
Yeah,
that's
Hattie
the game.
Fawcett, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
That's Hattie Fawcett from Focused for Business. Let's ask our next guest waiting in the wings. I think it's Richard Bermond. It's very nice to see Richard. Come on down. How are you?
Very good.
Very good. Richard Bermond, if you don't know already, an absolute leading light at the British Business Bank. Sometimes people worry, I've not heard of the British Business Bank, but of course you're funding the funders.
That is usually how we operate. We're sometimes a little bit in the background, but absolutely. So a lot of our work is to provide funding or instruments or different financial instruments to make sure that a whole range of funders have the funding to provide SMEs funds that they otherwise wouldn't provide, or perhaps funding at a better price or take on a bit more risk.
Yeah, and I thought it was a good plug there, funny enough, from Andrea at Swoop, for the start-up loan. Just remind us, because actually that is often deploying not that much cash. We watch Dragon's Den, we think it's all about 250 grand, $1 million here. This is from a much earlier stage.
Yeah, so their loans, their personal loans for business purposes up to £25,000 per director, up to 4 directors. It's a very simple product. It's there's no fees. It's sort of 6% sort of interest rate. So it's sort of a good price product. But really importantly, and it came through actually in the panel today. Really importantly, a whole load of support, both before the loan and then after the loan, so mentoring and post-loan support.
And so you've got these delivery partners. It might be Virgin Startup to name, but one of many, and you get a mentor with that as well.
Exactly.
So to what extent are there things that a big funder can do to change the game? In other words, to say, look, it can't just be a happy accident that we've funded 40, 50% women. We need to decide that that is our goal. Is that being too firm with targets, or is that part of changing the game?
Well, I think you do have to do some structural things. So the Invest in Women task force is a sort of right at almost the top of the pyramid here. That we're proud to be sort of centrally involved with that, and then through that there's then the Invest in Women code. And And the more funders, investment organisations, financial service organisations that sign up to that code, the better, because we all start to commit that we will change the balance and change the dynamics of this. So I think that's not necessarily about setting that doesn't force them to set certain targets, but it sets certain expectations about how you behave and how you operate. And that's the first piece of that jigsaw puzzle.
Now, that Investing Women Task Force, co-chaired by Debbie Wasco, at least £250 million going into female-founded and led businesses. What is something else that you would like to see happening? Because in many cases, what that's doing is deploying capital to women investors to fund women-funded businesses. What's another thing we, as women and men, have to get better at to see more of this capital deployed?
So, again, it came out a little bit in the panel. I think it is building I mean, we call them ambassadors within the bank, but it's building a set of ambassadors where we celebrate, where one of the challenges is if you don't have an easy access into finance, if perhaps you don't have the network, the connections, if you haven't got that easy route in, it can be daunting. And also, it's about that confidence. You don't want to, it's the confidence to sort of take on the challenge of being told no repeatedly, perhaps. So it's building a set of ambassadors and a set of evangelists that are through the ecosystem that say, yeah, it's possible, it can be done. This is how you do it. This is how I did it. And the more that happens, the more naturally you create confidence in female founders.
Right, so on that, I'm going to unfairly put you on the spot. The Startup Loan Scheme has deployed over £1 billion into over 100,000 businesses. What does that breakdown look like in terms of male, female founders, and of course through ethnic minorities as well? How does that look?
So it's just over 40% to female founders. So I think a strong performance there. There's more to be done. We've set ourselves the ambition of really getting that up to 45%, but I think that's a strength. And for ethnic minority founders, 20%. So 20% of the loans have gone to ethnic minority founders, which again is a good statistic saying that we are getting funds to sort of parts of the economy that traditionally find it more difficult to access.
And especially outside of the capital as well.
Yeah.
Right. Capital outside the capital. Richard Bermond, always good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Richard.
Thank you.
That's Richard Bermond from the British Business Bank. By no means least, our final guest is Louise Doyle. Welcome back, Louise. Very nice to see you. Thank you for doing this. And many congrats on the business, by the way. If guests weren't tuned into the main stage session, this is sort of corporate gifting, but taken to the next level, right?
Absolutely,
What's an example of one thing that's done quite well within that, then?
Oh, at the moment, so we are doing some really fantastic sustainable ideas. We've got a big financial customer at the moment who is gifting all of their clients, instead of giving them a physical gift, they're giving them business coaching, branding coaching, and investment coaching.
Very nice. And just remind us, and you touched on this on the main stage, but your first outside, where did that actually come from, your funding?
Began with angels. Yeah, we originally thought we were going to set out and do £1 million in investment, but unfortunately we had to reduce that a little bit.
Did you know them already?
No, all through networking, through accelerator programs, and putting
give us a
out
tip,
there.
because I'm always interested in.
Yeah.
You could call it cheekiness, chutzpah. Were there certain things that you had to do to get in front of these people, because they're not all queuing up to meet you initially?
No, they weren't actually. Weird that. No, I first of all I joined the Founder Institute, so it's a Silicon Valley-backed accelerator, and that got me in front of their huge network of people. So instead of just asking for advice here and there, I kept these people updated for a year with everything that we did, and I used that to grow my own network.
Really powerful. So it's that sort of connecting organisation. Yes. We've got lots here at Elite Business Live as well. And something I think about a lot is, I've got 2 daughters, one is 11, one is 4. I think to myself, are there times when them being in a minority in a room, it might be the girls playing football, for example, at the moment for my eldest, I want to put it to them that there are times when they can leverage that to their advantage. But I don't want to be seen as being a bit crass when I make that sort of observation. So help give us a steer on that and when it can be turned.
Do you know what? I think that's a really lovely thing to think of, because you're trying to give them the best opportunity, and perhaps there may have been a time, I think we spoke about on the panel, the pendulum swinging that way and trying to get it the other way. I think there are times when you can leverage that by people wanting to listen. You've heard about so many people, whether it's in the British Business Bank, other organisations, that want to increase the amount of investment and support they're giving female founders, minority founders. So if that is the case, then let's be those people that others can see. It's something that I'm trying really hard to do. It doesn't necessarily come naturally, but I'm trying really hard to be one of those people that others can see to help with.
And in that sort of more reflective mood, going back in time, things you wish you'd done differently, or if you had that time again, especially on this funding journey, because it's very easy with hindsight, right?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I've got a list literally down to the ground. Do you know what the number one would be? Not having the confidence in my own value initially. We, I believe, potentially undervalued ourselves with our first valuation of Needi. And now that I've got a fantastic network of male co-founders, you know, who tell me about their story, they were like, well, why on earth did you value yourself at that? So, you know, why didn't you do it higher?
Sort of backing yourself, but then that increases that valuation anyway in terms of valuation.
Hugely.
So this is Needi, that's needi.co.uk. A sneak peek of what's next for the company, anything you could tell us?
Absolutely. So we are currently working with some of the world's leading businesses. We've got global companies that were doing their new starter gifts, wellbeing gifts, and we're now starting to go overseas as well. So in the next couple of years, watch the space. We're looking at about 10 million in revenue.
Amazing. Watch this space indeed. Louise Doyle leading a brilliant business, Needi. Thank you very much indeed.
So much. Thank you.
Very good to see you, Louise.
Thank you.
So lots of practical tips there here at Elite Business Live. Thank you in advance for sharing these stories on our hashtag EBL2025. Lots more to come. Lots of connections still to be made. We'll see you very soon. Until then, stay tuned.